Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. Tonight we are going to talk about weird stuff, ETs or extradimensionals. Now, there is something really weird happening if you haven't been paying attention, right? There's some weird stuff. Now, it started way back in the 40s and 50s. You had the Foo Fighters, these craft that were showing up behind some of the Allied fighter planes. Fast forward to flying saucers, and then we have the whole craze in the 60s when aliens were really popular. Then it became unpopular, right? And it became crazy to start talking about aliens and UFOs, and you must have been a crackpot. Then you had the Men in Black, right? And then we come to, well, modern times, right? Now in 2017 there was I forget what it was called, but there was some law that was passed that said, hey, we got to start, disclosing things that are happening. And so some footage that had been filmed in 2004 by the U.S. Navy was released, showing a couple pilots that were in their whatever F-16s or whatever they fly nowadays, F-22s, and they were filming this thing that looked like a Tic Tac. All right. Now this is all out there. It's well documented. It is very high grade. You can trust the source that it is real. Now, what it is another question. Okay, that's the big question, right? What is it? That it's there, that it happened, we know that. All right, but what it is, well, that's another question. And then, of course, why? What whatever this thing is, why is it here? That's another big question. And we feel like we might have some answers when we come at it from a biblical perspective, especially an end times perspective. All right, so Joel is going to help us out tonight. He is going to take us through some slides that he put together. And so looking forward to this. Joel, why don't you go ahead and kind of just give us...
Let's be honest, we had Scott Roeder all planned out for tonight, and maybe I goofed it up. I don't know. Maybe I talked about the wrong topic. Our Scott says, yeah, I screwed it up. So I apologize to everybody. Scott was going to clearly state that these extra dimensionals are amongst us, walking amongst us right now. You know what? We'll still cover the topic in part, and if you guys have questions, we'll finish out with that. But let's get started here. Doug, can you pull up my slides, please? Pull up that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
there you go. Okay, let's see if I can get it clicking. There we go. Okay, so basically, Scott Roeder, the reason why I reached out to him was that I saw this Las Vegas alien from, last year, from 3/23, I think it was, or 4/23 of 1920 or 2023. And so basically he did investigations into this. The aliens were 8 to 10 feet tall. The police department saw them. He's friends with policemen and in Miami and in Las Vegas. He was able to interview the policemen, and they said, definitely, we saw this. So now we have proof that people saw these 8 to 10 foot tall beings. They were kind of weird looking, just like the picture in the middle. And gangly gray green creatures. Okay. And so Scott Roeder interviewed all the parties involved and proved that basically, and we're not going to hear it from his lips tonight, but that this is real, people, that these are amongst us. And then later on, we had the same thing occurring in Miami. So here's a little bit more about the 8 foot tall aliens in the Las Vegas backyard. So this is from 31 May 2024. So these 8 foot tall demon creature with big shiny eyes in his backyard. And so the family saw this. And Jim Quirk, who co-hosts the Extraterrestrial Reality podcast with Roeder, said he believed that something went wrong on the supposed alien spacecraft and forced them to land in the Kenmore's backyard. In the video, the Kenmore family captured a green light streaking across the sky before they began running the video, and then the video cuts off. Shortly after, they called 911, and the call is really rather amazing. And responding police officers confirmed that he also saw the green light. He also saw the aliens. And what I was hoping that Scott Roeder could confirm was the plasma aspect. It's my opinion that when I saw a demon in my bedroom back in 2006, it was like looking at a plasma. Like this demon just kind of popped into my bedroom to scare me. And he didn't say anything. He just sat there like, he looked like, if you've ever heard of the TV show Space Ghost, there's a character called Brack, and he looks like he wears like an African mask. And so this particular creature had energy beaming off his face, and he was just looking at me, and he was doing what a succubus would do, basically, or I don't know what the opposite is. Anyway, so basically, these particular creatures seem to have the ability to turn on and turn off that plasma generating ability and scare the people and then take off. So the last paragraph of this page is Quirk told Fox, my feeling is something went wrong with this craft or whatever they were in, and they had to come down and make an emergency landing. And it just got stranger after that. So what I'm arguing is that based on the Bible, that what we're dealing with is not extraterrestrials, they're extra dimensionals, that they in Revelation chapter 9 will come up from underneath the earth, from the Tehom in the Hebrew or the Abuso in the Greek. They will come up from that lower level, and they will be some kind of creatures that were locked up for a period of time. We also have to watch for asteroids and other things like that. It's going to be interesting watching the skies going forward. So here's Scott Roeder on the left-hand side. He is a crime scene reconstruction expert. He's a brilliant guy. We had a great time prepping, and then he bailed out on me at the end. But I understand. He's busy. He's tired. So he's been in many cases. He's been up here in Minneapolis for the Derek Chauvin case, and he was involved in the Oscar Pistorius case. That was the famous paraplegic that, or quad. No, he was the man that had replacement legs, and he was a racer. He was a fast sprinter, and he killed his girlfriend. And so he's been involved in these things. And so he was claiming that aliens are real. And the problem is now you look around, like New York is dragging in dragons. Okay, they've got a 300-foot tall dragon on the Empire State Building. They've got dragons all over the place. They're saying it's the Game of Thrones, but they're saying you must decide, or you have to choose. So basically, what I'm arguing is that the aliens aren't real. They can't hurt you, is what we used to say. Now, Alex Jones and others are saying they don't come from the sky. They're interdimensional. They're already among us. So that's what people are generally saying. So they would be alongside us in distinct stealth. That's a quote from Scott. Okay. And aliens might be living amongst us, disguised as humans, or in a base inside the moon, according to a new Harvard study. This is Harvard. Okay. And these could be disguising themselves as humans to fit in. They may have come from Earth's future, that's their opinion, or might have descended from intelligent dinosaurs. The study was created to offer an alternate, unconventional explanation for UAP sightings and to hypothesize what they might mean. And the probability or possibility that the UAP might involve forms of non-human intelligence, NHI, that are already present in Earth's environment makes some sense. That they exist alongside us in distinct stealth. The paper reads, the author became increasingly aware of the depth of evidence and theory that also tentatively supports another ultra-terrestrial explanation. They call it crypto-terrestrial. Hypothesis, our focus here, which holds that the UAP may reflect activities of the NHIs concealed here on Earth, underground, and its environs. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And now we'll go to the Bible after that. So guys, jump on and give us your opinions of this so far.
All right. Awesome. Well, I mean, I think it's great stuff, obviously. I think the term interdimensional does a whole lot more than extraterrestrial, because when we're looking for something outside of Earth, that means it's firmly fixed in the space of, in the solar system, or it could be in the Milky Way galaxy. But the people that are looking at these things, George Knapp, he's a ufologist, and he's saying that no, they've been living here behind some kind of a cosmic curtain. This is what in the what is it, the extraterrestrial atlas, they're suggesting that they live behind a cosmic curtain. The Bible calls that the veil, right? And once we understand, and we just have to do a little bit of translation between what the Bible is using for its terminology versus what ufologists are using for their terminology, but we're coming to the same thing. In fact, George Knapp, when I heard him describe it. He said he called it a thin psychical dimensional membrane. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's crazy, because that's exactly what the Bible talks about. In fact, you find this in many places. Isaiah, or he's writing in chapter 64, and he says, "Oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down." Ezekiel, when he's sitting by the river Chebar, he says that he saw the heavens opened up. That's what it's talking about. And so in Revelation chapter 6, when it talks about how the sky is going to recede like a scroll, that used to really bother me, because I'm like, what does that mean? Like the planets are going to go to one side and the stars go to the other side or something? I couldn't quite figure that out, because I was thinking very much spatially. But when you start thinking about dimensional veils, and I think quite honestly, Doctor Strange, the Marvel movie Doctor Strange, and all the little wizards, and they got their little sling rings or whatever those things are, and they can open these portals at will. I think we're talking about something similar to that, and I think that there is there is let's call it an overall veil that is surrounding our existence, however that may be. And the only way to get to the other side, to get to the spiritual side, is to go through some kind of a dimensional portal. Now, when the Lord comes back, I don't think he's going to be taking a portal. I just think that the whole veil, the thin psychical dimensional membrane, is going to come down. The cosmic curtain is going to come down, right? And so that's what I would suggest is going to happen at the very end of the age, when the Lord comes back. And when that happens, scary, 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 scary. All right. But before that happens, before Jesus comes back, and he comes back in flaming fire, we're going to have the guys from the other side, Satan et al., are going to come to this side, and they're going to come through some kind of a dimension. Now, the Bible calls that, the keys to the abyss. Okay. And it's, by the way, it's not the bottomless pit. However, I don't know where we ever got that idea, but it's the abyss.
Abyss, yeah. Abuso.
The abuso, right? So it's a very different idea. But in any event, he's going to come down from on high, right? He and Michael get into a battle. He gets kicked out. So he's pushed through. He's going to be pushed through that thin psychodimensional membrane. Satan and all of his crew are pushed through that. It's going to look like them falling from the heavens, as it were, to earth. All right. And they're going to look like stars falling. And then it says there was a star having fallen was given the key to the abyss. And then he's going to open that up. What's crazy is when you understand that the abyss, this is where Jesus went to Caesarea Philippi, and he said that the gates of Hades, or essentially the abyss, the same basic place, he said they will not prevail. In the first century Jewish apocalyptists believed, they believed that the gates of Hades were going to fling wide open at any moment, and really scary creatures were going to come out. I tend to believe that. I think that is what Satan intended to do. Remember, Satan doesn't know the timeline. He knows that there's some dude. Well, back then he knew some guy was going to come and step on his head, and he wasn't too excited about that. So he wanted to take precautions. And of course, the messianic expectation was incredibly high. So if you hear that someone's going to come and crush your head, what are you going to try to do about that? Well, you're going to try to get all the reinforcements you can. And so you're going to try to open up the abyss. You're going to open up the gates of Hades. You're going to open the gates to the underworld, which he was the king, by the way. And you're going to call all your reinforcements so that you can fight. Satan did not know the method by which Jesus would be fighting. I think that he fully believed that Jesus was going to come as a conquering king, and he was going to, let's get ready to rumble. I think that's what Satan was thinking. Okay, we're going to scrap. Okay, we're going to fight, and I'm ready, and I got all my reinforcements. You might be a tough dude, Jesus, but man, I'm going to outnumber you. Okay. And I think that was basically the idea. Well, of course, we know how that went down, right? Jesus, the incredible tactician, the strategist, and the savior, right, allowed himself to get that death blow, looking like he was failing, when in fact He was waiting. All right. So we know that story. Now we're talking some 2,000 years later. We're expecting the Lord to come back. We know how he's coming back the second time. We're told very clearly that he is coming as the conquering king. So Satan has a foot up on this one, okay, that he knows. So now the part he still doesn't know, though, is when does the curtain go up? And so what he's going to try to do is have the stage set as much as he possibly can. So when that stage goes up, he's ready to get going with all of the deception, right? And it's going to be a very strong delusion. It's going to be so strong of a delusion that mankind is going to think that they can fight against God and that they're going to win. That's a pretty strong delusion. So, again, all these things that we're seeing with these interdimensional beings, these tic-tac UFOs or, UAPs, whatever they are nowadays, it's all part of that stage setting. So, all right.
Yeah, good question from Tam. I'll just read it real quick. Would not the abyss, the abuso, be another type of dimension, at least for us? And I think that's a good argument. Doesn't it make sense to you guys?
We can't see into that realm unless we're allowed to. Your average person walking down the street cannot see into this realm. Some people do claim that, Joel. You mentioned earlier, my wife. People can say she's crazy. I don't think she is. She can claim to see things that are not necessarily physical that I can't see. And I believe that is I wouldn't want that necessarily gift or anything, but I do believe there are those that God allows to see beyond what we can see just with our eyes and hear with our ears and into that dimension at times. And there are some with that gift. I believe with opening up certain doors, it can certainly be a curse if through drugs or through occultic practices that they can literally see and maybe even hear into that realm. I mean, you start to look into some of Aleister Crowley's drawings and who he said he was talking to, and Alice Bailey and the Theosophist, what was her name back in the 19th century?
Blavatsky.
Yeah. One of the ugliest women ever, Blavatsky. I mean, she might have been a tranny back before tranny was cool. So.
Yeah. I mean, we are talking about these other dimensionals, and clearly, even the ancients must have known. Hey, let's just figure this out here. The Tower of Babel. What in the world was that? That was a Stargate. All right. It was quite literally. It's in the name. Okay. I mean, Bab El. Right. Bab means gate, and El means God. Right. Or Ilyon. Bab Ilyon. Babylon. Right. It's the gate of the gods. Right. So that's the reason God came down. So for God to personally get in the mix and say, oh my goodness, this is a big deal. I got to get involved. Okay, something radical is going on, right? We know what happened in the flood, right? You had the sons of God dating and mating the daughters of men, all right? And you have the Nephilim and all that stuff. Well, God's like, well, that's not going to work. He flushes them down the toilet. Then some 400 years later, now you've got the Tower of Babel, and God's like, uh-oh, I need to get involved in this one again. Okay. What was going on there? It was because they were trying to create a Stargate, right? And the ancient literature, not only the Bible, but the ancient Sumerian, Akkadian literature talks about how, this would be the nexus point between heaven and earth. Oh, and guess what Satan claimed himself to be? He was the bridge between heaven and earth. He was the ladder. Ooh, the ladder. That's interesting, right? He would be the one that would connect the two worlds. He would be that silver cord, as it were, that would connect heaven and earth. Of course, what did Jacob dream? Well, he dreamt that he saw a staircase, a ladder with angels ascending and descending on it. And what did Jesus say about that ladder? He said, I'm the ladder, okay? And you're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, right? So they were able to see what was happening. They could see behind the veil. I would not be surprised if they were using drugs of some sort to see beyond that veil, but I'm not sure. Maybe there was another way. Maybe they just had to.
Maybe incantation.
Sorry?
Incantations. It seems like that's what they use to get to that. Like they use the term abracadabra. I create what I speak, things like that. It's kind of a Hebrewism. It sounds like they use speech to create certain things. Bilam from Numbers 22 or 24, he claims that he had an open eye, a special type of an open eye to see these things. So
Yeah.
you wonder
Yeah.
if it's just I'm arguing against extraterrestrial, guys, just so you're aware.
Yeah.
And Lisa, just so you're aware, Scott Roeder bailed out at the last minute because I think our Scott thinks I scared him off. I don't know. Anyway, the point is we're doing the show anyway. And so I really think that they're extra dimensionals. And as we get into Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 through 15, we are not going to see God saying, well, they come from Shemaim, far off, and Uranos.
Well, yeah, and Jacques Vallée, one of the greatest UFO researchers, he talked about how they really these aliens or whatever, that people have had encounters with so-called aliens. They act much more like demons than they do beings from some distant solar system or star system or something like that. So when you start putting all the pieces together and you start looking at it, let's talk about alien abductions. Okay, I mean, alien abductions have to be one of the weirdest things you could possibly talk about. You'll never see me talking about alien abductions at a party, right? I'm just like, I'm not going to talk about that because it's just weird stuff. All right. But, we're in good company here, so we can talk about it. So you have, hundreds of hypnotic regressions of where people, interviewed by John Mack from Harvard or Dr. David Jacobs from Temple University. People came to either of these men and they said, hey, you know what? I was abducted by an alien. So he's like, okay, let's do a hypnotic regression. And there's a very, very common theme throughout all the different stories is, they were lying in their bed, then they felt paralyzed, then they were taking some kind of a craft, some kind of a ship or some sort. They were put on some kind of a table. The beings, often they look like alien grays. They would come and they kind of did the eye exam where they would put their eyes against their eyes and sort of download information and also read their brain. And then they would take seed. In the case of men, it was sperm. In the case of women, it was an egg. And they would take this stuff, right? And you're like, okay, that's weird. You came all this way. You traveled hundreds of light years or thousands of light years. I don't know. And you came and now you live in the shadows. You're going to live and do these weird sort of sexualized experiments. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. David Jacobs is on record saying that he used to be really excited about this, but then, now he's pretty nervous about it. He's like, something's really weird. Clearly, according to these alien beings, I think John Mack said this, that, the alien beings, according to the hypnotic regressions, see themselves as sort of a way to save mankind, of a last resort if things don't go so well, and they are a semi materialized class of beings, and so they're looking for some kind of a fully material host. Oh my goodness, what does this sound like to you guys? Right? I mean, this sounds totally like, well, I mean, hello, this sounds like demons of some sort, right? So again, I was reading this almanac. It was the Extraterrestrial Almanac by Campo Basso. I think it's Pablo or something. And he's talking about the draconians. Okay, now the draconians, they happen to look like sort of half men, half frog. The top of their body is a frog kind of layout, and they're incredibly arrogant. They think that they are greater than everybody. They hate humans. They have a pungent smell. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this sounds just like what we have in Revelation chapter 16, where you have the spirits of frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So some weird things are going on here. But according to the almanac, the draconians are not fully materialized. They live behind the cosmic curtain, and
veil. Okay.
Behind the veil,
Okay.
And they sound just like demons. I mean, 100%.
Is that the rakia, do you think, in the Hebrew? Is that
No,
kind of event? No, it's completely different. Okay.
No. Oh my, you just had to ask that question, didn't you? No, the rakia, for all those flat earthers who are
It's
listening.
a
No,
hard dome.
no.
It's a hard dome.
I didn't ask a question.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So the rakia, it's a better translated as expanse. Expanse. Okay. Expanse or void. All right. So think of like outer space. That is the rakia. All right.
Hold on, and think about where birds fly. Birds fly in the rakia. I was watching Goat Boy last night debate this topic with another person, and I was like, he kept on talking about the firmament, and nobody ever talks to any of these people about birds flying in it. Heaven is right above us. The expanse begins right here. This is the expanse. We have the earth and we have the heavens. Everything above the earth, irrespective of the shape, ran off. So,
I'm sorry I brought it up.
Well,
so anyway, I will give you.
I did star this earlier.
Okay. Do you have something else to pull up, Scott?
Yeah, I started earlier. Since we're talking about aliens and conspiracies, let's just rumble around about shapes. As long as people don't divide about shapes or try to convert me and convince me that I don't believe the Bible because I don't believe their interpretation of the Bible regarding shapes, we can be great friends. We can get along. We can talk. We can talk about 99 other subjects and biblical topics, and we can talk about the weather. So, but anyway, Joel brought it up. Sorry, guys.
I'm sorry. In rabbinic thought, they explain the rakia as being angels that protect God's brilliance from us, because we would burn up if we were in God's presence. So he has angels that form this boundary, this veil, you could call it rakia, and that's how they explain it. It's cute.
Yeah. Well, back to that question, nowhere does it say that the earth is a ball. Another way that we could look at the passage that is often used from Isaiah 40:22 in the New King James, it is God who sits above the circle of the earth. But that word there is the Hebrew word chug. All right. Now, chug is related to the word chag. All right. Chag sameach. All right. So happy holiday. All right. Now, there's an Arabic word that's related, which is the word hajj. What do you do on a hajj? You go to Mecca. Do you stay at Mecca? No, you come back. So it's a circuit. All right. You do a circuit. So I think you could just as easily translate that as, God who sits above the circuit of the earth. All right. Now that gives it a whole different and fresh perspective. Right. So it's not God who's just sitting above planet Earth, but he's actually sitting above the earth as it does its orbit around the sun. All right. So, all right. We probably should leave those comments for another day. All right.
Yeah. I don't want to stir that.
Well, if anybody wants, next week, we've got some lively people getting upset about some of my comments about the Orange Man and thinking that that's an endorsement of Biden for some reason. I don't know if this person has never listened, but next week we're going to be discussing 1776 and the occultic and Christian foundations of America. In other words, we're not just going to talk about just the occultic. There were some very, very solid Christian men that were involved in founding this country, but there were just as many, if not more, that were Freemasons and heavily into the occult, even if they didn't realize it. So,
and let's take a shot here at the elephant in the room. You don't have to. You can be conservative and not like the orange guy. All right. I'm one of them. Okay. I do not like Donald Trump. In fact, with a passion, I dislike him, but it doesn't make me somehow some flaming liberal. Right. Doesn't mean that I'm in love with Joe Biden either, but let's just make that very clear, because what we have is we start getting into a holy war, right? You start saying, well, my candidate clearly is God's man. Right now, when Maria came on and she showed us all of the paraphernalia and icons and just downright idolatry of Donald Trump, it makes me very ill. In fact, I was on Facebook some time ago, and just after he got convicted, all these people had all these memes of Trump, the big savior, and these lions are walking next to him and all this different stuff. I mean, guys, let's be honest, right? There's a lot of Donald Trump worship that's going on, right? And so be careful that you don't mingle Jesus with U.S. politics, all right?
Correct.
Okay, so we are to be ambassadors of Christ, not ambassadors of red or blue. All right, so let's make that really clear. All right, Jesus did not get involved in the riffraff of his day. He could have, but he didn't. This guy named Judas, remember him, Judas Iscariot? He really wanted Jesus to get involved in the politics of his day. And guess what? Jesus didn't do it. All right, so you need to stop. I mean, just telling you, a warning here. Stop equating your candidate with God's choice. Okay. So, we got a couple bad choices here. And hey, vote your conscience. That's fine.
Or just don't vote.
Or don't vote, whatever. But don't equate and say, well, Donald Trump clearly is God's choice. Remember this guy named Joshua? He was pretty awesome. Okay. So after his servant Moses died, God appointed Joshua. And so then Joshua goes across the Jordan River. They're getting ready. There is the city of Jericho. And guess what? He sees this dude. Okay. And he goes over, right? And he's like, hey, are you with us or with our enemies? And what did that man say? No, I'm the captain of the Lord's army, right? And guess what Joshua did, right? He took off his shoes, he bowed down, because who was he confronting, or who was confronting him? Jesus, right? Jesus is not on your side. He's not on my side. We have to get on his side, all right? That's the only way we can do it. That doesn't mean Jesus doesn't like us or isn't concerned about what we care for or stand for, but it doesn't. But when we start saying that, well, God's on my side, then we get into a holy war. And look, if God is on my side, then your side clearly must be, well, the devil's side, right? And that's where we really get into some ugly, ugly stuff. And it leads to Christian nationalism. It leads to, this happened in Nazi Germany, right? Remember that Hitler was a Christian, okay, in big old quotes. But did he go to church? Yes. Did the church endorse the man? Yes. Did the Pope endorse him? Yes. Right. Now we can look back and say, oh, well, that was different. But if you were there at the time, it would have been different. If you had been a good, God-fearing German, you would have found a way to say, this is God's man. And that's what they did. All right. So don't think that we can't get sucked into that same trap, because we certainly can. All right. So just, again, be very careful, guys, that we don't fall into that same trap.
Well, and to your point, when people would say that in 2016 that Trump was God's chosen person, I would say, amen. I've read Daniel 2. I believe what Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, that it is the true God that appoints kings and removes kings. And so then I would follow up, as was Obama, as was Bush, as was Hitler, as was Napoleon, as was any and all leaders. It is God that raises them up, and it's God that brings them down. So if Trump is selected, ultimately, I don't like to give the head puppets too much credit, because they can do nothing that God doesn't allow them to do. They just think they're in control. But yeah, they are selected. But ultimately, it's God that allows a Putin or a North Korean dictator, or Netanyahu right now, for the conspiracy theorists that hate all Jews and think they're all in bed with the Luciferians. But it is God that is allowing all this and permitting all this, and has allowed everything to happen. He is sovereign. And I got into this is before Rob Skiba passed away, but he was where I'm at right now. And then for some reason in that last election cycle, Skiba went crazy for Trump and just refused to say that God would ever allow someone like Biden to be elected. And one of my last communications with him was, dude, you've got a really small God. You're cherry picking little bits and pieces of scripture as opposed to just understanding, God raised up Nebuchadnezzar to judge Judah. God raised up the Assyrians to judge Israel and to cart them off. This has been his part of his plan. So if Trump is selected, it's only because God allowed it. I believe he will be selected, and like to your point, Doug, about Christian nationalism, it has never been a good thing when the state and a religion unite. Zwingli, if you were an Anabaptist back in Switzerland when Zwingli was in control, he had his version and he carried over that infant baptism thing. And how dare the Anabaptists want to get baptized as adults after they professed a faith in Yeshua, Jesus? He would cut a hole in the ice. And that history and religion and state merging together is never a good thing. And I'm not SDA, but I will tell you, I see the writing on the wall that's coming with European backlash. A lot of this stuff, this just in your face nonsense we're seeing, this, the people that are controlling Biden, they're not stupid about this immigration thing. This is all planned and being allowed to happen. I believe it's for the backlash that is coming. And a lot of Christians are going to be excited about it initially, just like a lot of Germans were. I don't think it's going to end well with a person like Trump and his personality. And he will be used by God. Yes, I believe if he's elected, he will be used by God, but not as many of you Trump sniffers think he will.
All right. Do we have another question? Or do you want to go on, Joel? You have more. I think you have more to your presentation.
I had more, but wow. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so basically, I'm arguing that these creatures, so they're popping out of the abuso in Revelation chapter 9, are not popping out from another cosmos, like they're not popping in from a galaxy far, far away. This is not Star Trek here or any of those types of shows. This is just basically, they seem to be separated from a veil or by a veil from us. And if that veil was loosened right now, you would be able to see them. So let's read the verses and see what it says. The fifth angel sounded the shofar, and I saw a star that had fallen out of heaven. Okay, yeah, the star is falling out of heaven, but not the little creatures, onto the earth. And he was given the key to the shaft leading down to the abuso. He opened the shaft of the abyss, and there went up smoke from the shaft like the smoke of a huge furnace. The sun was darkened, the sky too, and the smoke from the shaft, by the smoke from the shaft. Then out of the smoke onto the earth came locusts, and they were given power like the power of scorpions here on earth. They were instructed not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green plant, or any tree, but only the people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. The locusts were not allowed to kill them, only to inflict pain on them for 5 months. And Scott and I were talking before the show, there's this time with Noah where it's 150 days. Well, this is basically 5 months, 150 days. And it's just odd to see the connection there. And pain that they caused was like pain of a scorpion sting. In those days, people will seek death, but not find it. So they would want to suicide out, but they will not find it. And they will long to die, but death will elude them. So what we're seeing here is that something's going on that is, I'm arguing it's extra dimensional, people. I'm not arguing this is Star Trek showing up from a billion galaxies away. This is right here, right in our faces, right next door. We just aren't noticing them. So let me click to my next slide if I can get it to go. Okay, so now, and I'm arguing this is a Joelism, so keep that in mind. So if you want to argue, this is Joel saying they're going to be huge. They're going to be 9 feet tall, just like these creatures in Miami, just like the creatures in Las Vegas. They're 8 to 10 feet tall. They're going to be huge. And the reason for that is you wouldn't be frightened of a little scorpion on the ground. It wouldn't scare you at all. You'd stomp on it, it'd be over and dead. So in this case, they're going to be very huge. And I have 2 women that came to me during the same week that I was recreating my video back in 2018 about this on chapter 9. And they both said, we saw them in a vision. They're 9 feet tall. They're huge, 8 to 10, whatever. Okay, locusts look like horses outfitted for battle. Doug's got an interesting slide. Maybe he'll pop it up later on of these hybrid creatures that are kind of horse-like and kind of locust-like and kind of whatever else, and he knows where it is from Babylon. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold, and on their faces were like human faces. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like that of lions. Their chests were like iron breastplates, and the sound of their wings made what was like a roar of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails like those of scorpions with stingers, and these tails had the power to hurt people for 5 months again. So it states it twice. That's two witnesses of this time frame. They had, I'm arguing, the king is 12 feet tall because both of these women that came to me independently without any prompting at all and just said, here's the information that you need. 9-foot tall locust, 12-foot tall king over the angel of the abyss, whose name was Abaddon in our language, and he's the destroyer in the Greek. And so, guys, any thoughts on, are they extra dimensional or extraterrestrial?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pulling up that picture.
Because they've been here before. Doug's going to pull up the picture, and while he's doing that, I'll work on my slides.
So there it is, right? So, again, this is called a Kuduru stone. This is from 1200 BC. And, you can see right up here, here's the head. Here's the lion's head. Okay, obviously a man's torso. He's got a bow and arrow right here. He has wings. Okay, he's got these front hooves, kind of look like horses. So he has kind of the general shape of a horse. But then, he also has the back talons. You can't see it pretty well here, but he's got eagle's talons back here. He has the tail of a scorpion, and mind you, he's got a serpent head phallus, right? And so I just couldn't figure out this text for a long time, because what I had to do was take the 5th trumpet and the 6th trumpet and superimpose them over one another. And I'll tell you, when I did that, oh my, it was crazy, right? It all came into focus, and I'm like, there it is. Okay, so this is 100% match. This is the god Nergal. He's the god of the underworld. Nergal had many, many names. Okay, the god of the underworld had many names. And this general picture of what this thing is a general picture of what also Satan looked like, right? And so there's many iterations of this, but we have a picture. I have it as a relief, but it goes back to probably about 3000 BC from Uruk, okay, which is biblical Erech. And guess where Nimrod established his cities? Well, Erech was one of them. Calneh, Babylon, Akkad, right? These are the cities that Nimrod, also known in the ancient world as Nin-Urta, right? Now, some of you guys have said, I thought this was about end times prophecy. Well, it is, but we have to understand what was happening. We have to understand what was happening back at the Tower of Babel, and of course, back in the days of Noah. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So we have to understand, because we have the same players, right? Same players. They're going to come back. They are going to, do bad stuff all over again. Satan only has so many people on his crew, right? And so he's going to use them when the time comes. And they're the same basic bad guys that we've seen pretty much from the beginning, more or less. Okay. Oh. They should come up out of the abyss. Well, that makes sense as well, because who has been the god of the abyss? Well, Satan. Okay. He's the god of the underworld. When you look at Ezekiel chapter 28, this, again, one of these passages, I always believed that it was about Satan, but it wasn't until I did my own deep dive that I could really understand what was going on there. And you start having the king of the city, right? So the city of Tyre. Who was the king of the city of Tyre? That would be, gosh, well, I can't think of his name, but kind of me just a second. Okay. Yeah. But, the king of the city, when they talked about the city, they were talking about the underworld. That was the city that they were talking about, was the underworld. Okay, so and there's a bilingual inscription where you have Melkart. There we go. Melek Karat. Karat means for city, right? We see the word, Karat Arba, right? Kiryat Arba, which is Karat Arba. So Melkart, Melech Karat, he's the king of the city. So there's a bilingual Greek and Phoenician inscription that has Melkart on one side and it has Heracles on the other side. All right. And those are both the king of the city. And you're like, wait a second, Heracles? You mean Hercules, right? Yeah. Hercules in the Roman tradition, Heracles in the Greek tradition. But who was Heracles? Hercules was none other than Ninurta. And who was Ninurta? Nimrod. Okay. Why is this significant? Because according to the ancient world, Ninurta was the son of Enlil. And Enlil basically looked like the thing that we have on the screen here, okay, and various iterations of that. But, the king of the underworld. Now, according to the ancient world, to the ancient texts, it was Enlil, Satan, who gave the tablet of destinies to Ninurta. And with the tablet of destinies, he could control the affairs of man and decree fates. This is a pretty big deal, right? Well, I think that Jesus went and snatched that back. I think it now sits at the Father's right hand. It has 7 seals on it, and nobody can open it, whether in heaven or earth. No strong angel can open it, but only the Lamb that's been slain is worthy to open the scroll, okay? To open that scroll. Right. And so when Jesus takes that scroll out of the Father's hand, he takes that tablet of destinies out of the Father's hand and he begins to open it. What he's doing is he's executing judgment, obviously, right? But he's executing the rights and prerogatives over the planet. He's taking back what is his. It's kind of like, if he went to court and he gets his judgment against Satan, and then the judgment, the writ of judgment is put in a safe, right, until the proper time. And so Satan's like, okay, you got a judgment against me, big deal, right? I'm not leaving, right? And Jesus is like, okay, I'll come and take you out personally when the time is right, right? So yeah, Satan has been judged. But on a practical level, he hasn't really had to go anywhere. He's maybe had to change his operations a little bit, but for the most part, he's still kind of doing the same basic stuff. And so this is why it's so important to understand. And when you find in Revelation chapter 9, the same exact, detail by detail description and drawing, etching of the creature that is the 200 million creatures that will come out of the abyss, I think we should take notice. I think this is a really huge deal.
Well, there's nothing new under the sun. The end is declared out of the beginning. And so to truly understand Revelation, the problem with I'll beat up on Christian prophecy teachers over the past 200, 300, 400 years. The problem is they've been trying, especially maybe in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they've been trying to understand Revelation through a 21st century lens. You had people saying that this is a vision of Apache helicopters, and again, not understanding that Revelation, although you don't have hardly any direct quotes, you have all these allusions and little snippets, pretty much from chapter 1 to chapter 22. That all go back to the Tanakh, to either the Torah, the writings, or the prophets. And to truly understand Revelation, you really do have to know the front of the book.
You
do. And otherwise, you're just it. Otherwise, what you end up with is the wild, wild west of Christian prophecy scholars and who get bogged down in the weeds on, a zapture as opposed to focusing on the resurrection, as opposed to focusing on, where in Scripture is there evidence of literal harpazos that happened twice in the New Testament. We have one in Isaiah, and so that's where the focus has been. And then you get all these varying opinions, as opposed to what Doug is showing here. There's nothing new under the sun. This this Greek word for Apollyon, and it's just the Greek expression for what Doug just went through as far as the history of the name. The name has only evolved or changed or morphed. It's the same entity all the way back to the beginning. And so that's where we're talking about prophecy. But to understand prophecy, you have to understand Genesis. You have to understand the Torah. You have to understand the book of Joshua and what we're seeing in Joshua. And what happened in Joshua, and so the second Exodus, the gathering of all of Israel and all of Judah at the end of the age, it's all there for us. It's a big jigsaw puzzle. It's hard to, the three of us like each other, we're friends, but we don't have the pieces in the same place. We have different chronological orders, and none of us claim to have this 100% figured out. And if we do, then we need a pride check.
Right. So. And I have to say that when I was writing Corrupting the Image Volume 2, that's when I really did this massive deep dive into ancient history. I kept wondering, I'm like, okay, in the book of Revelation, Satan is called the Great Red Dragon, but why? When I started asking those pesky why questions, and I'm like, there's got to be a reason, why a Great Red Dragon? I mean, out of all the things that Satan could have been identified as, why that? Why is there a woman riding a beast? I mean, that just seems pretty random, right? But when you go back and you find in the ancient world that Inanna, Ishtar, was literally riding on the back of Satan, Enlil, you're like, oh, okay. And mind you, Satan or Enlil was also known as Nimrod or Ninurta, that they were kind of this hybridized being, that they were both the same. And you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting, and when you begin to understand that, the woman riding the beast, well, who's in control of who? Is she steering the beast, or is the beast directing her? Well,
she thinks she is. She
exactly.
She is.
The answer
for a period
is
of time, she thinks she is.
Yeah. So again, these are not biblical ideas. A woman riding the beast is not a biblical idea. This is a Babylonian idea. And I mean the first Babel, when Nimrod established it. The Stargate, remember that thing? The Stargate? Yeah. That's why it all comes together. And you're like, oh, a Stargate. Wait a second.
Portal.
Then he's going to open the door to the abyss. You're like, oh, a Stargate, right? Like, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about extra dimensional beings coming through some kind of Stargate. Now, it may not be some, big metal lid in the earth, that's how I used to imagine it. But, it could be really fancy door, it could be the coolest door you've ever seen, that something you might have seen on the Marvel Avengers kind of stuff. But
it could be
there's some
storks
kind of
with
door
lead
that's going to
pots.
open. What's that?
It could be storks with lead pots from Zechariah. You never know.
It could be very boring, but
I brought up April's comment because the Christians need to understand the Bible's supernatural nature. They have problems embracing this concept. And I would say when it comes to prophecy, they do. A solid Christian that believes God's word, especially our dispensational brothers, they'll look back at all these miracles and how God protected Israel and how God protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego through the fire, and Daniel in the lion's den. And then they'll read Revelation and go, there's no way that any of us could ever survive this. And Shadrach and Daniel are saying, hold my beer. Our God can do whatever he wants to do to protect his people if he chooses to do it through these seals, through these trumpets. We could even be around through the bowls and not be affected by them. I don't think we'll be here for the bowls, but I'm just saying it's possible. His people, if he chooses, can be protected through this. We see that the ones that have the seal of God have nothing to worry about these demon hornets that are coming out of this abyss. They don't touch anybody that has the seal of God. It's
Goshen.
Nothing to be worried about.
Yeah, if you're in Goshen, you're fine.
Or again, for these demon bugs, Joel, if you have the seal of God, it doesn't matter if you're in Minnesota or Alabama at that time. They will not affect you.
Thomas Etienne asked, but the fifth angel sounds after the abomination of desolation, which did not happen yet. So I presume he's asking something in relation to maybe what I was talking about, if I get the question right. But, Thomas, I would just suggest you might want to check out my paper, Why You Should Read Revelation Thematically versus Chronologically. I was plagued by the same thing. I was raised a dispensationalist. And so I thought, first come the seven seals, and then come the seven trumpets, and then come the seven bowls. But after studying Revelation for, I don't know, 25 years or something, I began to realize that it's not laid out in a chronological fashion. In fact, if you try to do that, you got some big problems, because when you get to the sixth seal, that's it. I mean, all the mighty man, the strong man, every free man, we're saying to the rocks and to the caves, fall on us and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb, right? For the day of his great wrath is come. Right. So they are throwing up the white flag. They're like, we're in big trouble. This is it. And by the way, the heavens had just opened up. Right. I mean, so this is kind of a big deal. And you see the same exact thing happening in Revelation chapter 16 under the bowl judgments, where you have the every island is moved out of its place. That's in Revelation 6. But then in Revelation 16, the same thing. There's a great earthquake, unlike the world's ever seen, and every island and mountain were moved out of their place, so they're not found. Right. So when you have something that huge, I live right next, I'm at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. If these things moved out of their place, that would be really scary. Okay. In fact, that might just be the end of the world if the entire Rocky Mountain chain moved. And that's just one of them, right? Imagine all the mountain chains moving out of their places. I don't know. That seems like a really big deal. When Fukushima happened in 2011, it was a 9.1. And they say that it moved the Earth, 1 inch off its axis, right? And that was only a 9.1 over there in Japan. So imagine you have all the islands and mountains moving out of their place. That is huge. And I'll tell you what happens is so many dispensational scholars are like, yeah, those guys on the planet, they're just kind of exaggerating. And I'm like, no, they're not exaggerating. Scripture is saying what's happening. So instead of reading it chronologically and you get to the sixth seal and you're like, well, it's not really a big deal. Say, no, it is a big deal. In fact, it's the end. So kind of look at the sixth seal, or the seals, as sort of the executive summary. All right. This is like, there's the 30,000 foot view of what's going to happen. And then we're going to drill down and get more detail. And then we're going to drill down even more and get even more detail. And it makes it so much easier to understand.
I'd say to your point, which are dispensational brothers, and I'd love for Thomas to chime in, because I've yet to have anybody answer this. If we look, and we're actually in the bowls, and Yeshua is coming as a thief during the bowl judgments, during the no doubt vials wrath. Yeshua is coming as a thief, and we see that same metaphor. I don't believe he's making up new metaphors. Paul's using that. Peter uses that. And then that is when he comes as a thief. And again, none of us, if we're still alive at that time, if we haven't, if God hasn't chosen to protect us and we're eliminated as far as our physical life, so what? If you have the attitude of Paul, so what? It doesn't matter. So many people are focused on living and surviving in their flesh, as opposed to when this happens. And again, it's easy to say this now, guys. If and when all this starts to be unleashed, you're going to have faith in your Bible. I mean, the Israelites, they saw everything that happened when God's wrath and judgments were poured out on the Egyptians, and yet they still did not have faith. Only 2 gave a positive report. They ended up being led around in the wilderness for a total of 40 years because of lack of faith. And so I see this happening, this second Exodus. Many are going to lack that faith, and they're going to cave to the system. They're going to want to return to Babylon so they can eat their cucumbers in leeks and have their air conditioning, and they will want to be a part of that system. We've gotten very comfortable, as you said, I think last week. I love my air conditioning. I love being able to turn the stove on. I don't have to stoke a fire. I don't have to go out in the heat and cook this. You know, when it's cold, I hit a little button and I'm warm again. And it's not going to be like that at the end of the age. And so that's why knowing what Scripture says, and I just don't think, again, I'd love for Thomas to reply as to why is Yeshua coming as a thief during the bowl judgments is you know, I've never got an explanation from anybody on that wants to say, you know, well, he comes as a thief twice. You know, sort of like the first resurrection. Well, it's really the first resurrection that happens at the rapture. And then that Revelation 20 first resurrection, it really doesn't mean the first resurrection. We're going to be really literal about these 1,000 years. And then the second resurrection is really sort of the third resurrection.
Wow.
It makes no sense.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, guys. So this is a picture of Brack from the Space Ghost show, and basically that's what I saw. And you can see the energy kind of pulsating off him. That's basically what I saw in my bedroom back in 2006. So what I want to point out is that the rabbis believe this too. They claim that demons, shadim, wear masks. And so this is from Deuteronomy 32, and Heiser hits that a lot. By the way, in 2 weeks, we're going to have some Heiser people on the show, and Doug and I are going to debate, and Doug claims he's going to hammer me. So pray for mercy from Doug that he doesn't hammer me too hard. But anyway, they sacrificed to shadim, no gods that were never known, new ones. So put that in your thought process. These are literally new ones. They seem to be demonic. That means that they weren't created in the first place. They probably came from the mating of these Nephilim with the sons of man, the daughters, rather not the sons, but the daughters of man. And so they're new ones who came but lately, who stirred not our forebears' fears, Deuteronomy 32:17. So once again, they sacrificed. That's a zavak sacrifice, which is a festival. So they had a party about this when they sacrificed la shadim to the demons, and they were not of God. And so Doug, if you have a comment about the Elohim, I'm assuming that's a small e, Elohim, in the text there in the Hebrew.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Elohim is Elohim no matter how you look at it. We know that it's a small g God because the word Elohim followed by a plural verb will tell you that it's the small gods, whereas it's Elohim followed by a singular verb. That would be God Almighty. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember, I vaguely remember I had a conversation with a rabbi who said he didn't believe in demons. And I'm like, well, what about this one? He's like, well, that doesn't really count. I was like, well,
they do in private.
Okay.
They won't admit it to Christians, but they will in my circles.
Oh man, I was just like, well, I don't know. I mean, here you go, right? Shadim. Yeah, you know, again, when you start looking at the ancient world and you start understanding, you know, where these things are coming from. By the way, the word demons, at least in English or in Greek, doesn't always mean the bad guys. The word daemonia is often interchanged with Elohim. So daemonia is Greek, Elohim is Hebrew, of course. And in the Greek thought, daemonia or just means mighty ones. Guess what Elohim means? Mighty ones. Okay. So daemonia, it could be, you know, good mighty ones. It could be bad mighty ones. Although, you know, when you're talking about Greek gods, you're probably talking about the bad ones most of the time. So that's why in the Christian world, daemonia just came to mean only the bad guys. Right. And yeah, so there are other beings that have been around on this planet for a long time.
The whole time, guys.
And you know what's so funny is that if you again, you watch the movies, right? So I watched Marvel's Eternals, and I'd give it maybe a C+ as far as the movie goes. But they were just straight up telling us what to expect, that the ancient gods were actually aliens, and they've been watching over the planet for eons now, and they've been wanting us to they're here to take care of the planet, and they're going to get involved if anything gets too out of hand. I was like, oh my goodness, like that's exactly what the so-called extraterrestrials are telling us today, and that's essentially what the basic message of demons of old. All right, keep going.
All right, so let's keep going with this. So basically, according to the rabbis again, and this is from Wiki, but it's citing the rabbis in early midrashim. So a midrash would be a sermon, basically, from the rabbis, but 1,000 years ago. The shadim are corporal beings, corporal. If they take on human forms, their feet would remain like that of a rooster. That's kind of cool. I don't know where they came up with that, but to see the shadim were present, ashes were thrown on the ground or floor, which rendered their footsteps visible. In later Judaism, these entities developed into more abstract beings. Shadim can shape shift. So I want to point that out. This is rabbinic. This is coming from Wiki, of course, but the rabbis thought that they could enter our dimension and then bounce back out again. They were extra dimensional. So sometimes assuming in human form, the Talmud telling of the shade, so shadim singular would be shade, Asmodeus, assuming King Solomon's form and actually ruling in his place for a time, although he had to take care never to be seen barefoot because he would not be able to disguise his clawed feet. So
I just hold on. I just pulled up a
go for it.
So again, this is that same kind of creature that I showed you before, where it's more of a horse-like, but here he's standing on 2 feet. You can see he's got again those eagle's talons on the front, what look like hooves on the back feet, the scorpion's tail. So these creatures were basically getting. These are called the scorpion people or the Girta Blutu. All right, this is a scorpion man. I forget the exact year on this, but this is probably, at least 1600 BC, probably even more like 2000 BC. But, we're seeing these same kinds of things that you're talking about, Joel. And so that would be a shed. What I'm showing you right here is a shed.
Yes, that's a shed.
Yeah, shed or shadim, right? So these or shadim. So these are the things that people were seeing. I don't know how they could see these. If they were all taking ayahuasca, I have no idea. But again, or they were using incantations, they were able to see into the other realm, just like Balaam could see into the other realm.
He had an open eye.
He did, so the creatures we're talking about are very real. They've morphed a bit over the years, but they're still the same basic thing.
So I want to cite the Catholics because they're so intriguing on this. Back in 1917, they thought they saw Mary a bunch of times in 1917. And then as they moved along, Doug, if you could kind of move it back to, there you go. Yeah, keep it there. So anyway, with these Marian apparitions, they had 3 children. Now, it wasn't adults, it was little kids. And so this is coming from the National Register, the Catholic Register, and they're saying that they need to publish more information about it because things are picking up, people. Now, I'm not claiming that Mary's going to be involved in the process, but I think a false Mary will and lead people the wrong direction. So let's pretend that Mary is revered, Jesus too, in many faiths. The Muslims revere Mary as the mother of a prophet. They revere Jesus as a prophet. And so it's very intriguing. And keep in mind, Fatima was the daughter of Muhammad, or wife, daughter of Muhammad. And so this 1917 stuff is just weird. So let's move on to the next one. I just want you to note this, that the apparitions happened on May 13th, then June 13th, then July 13th. It was supposed to occur. They were warned that it would be August 13th, but then unfortunately, some people got involved and caused an uproar. And so the Mary showed up on the 19th, then September 13th, then October 13th. And so this is children that are the witnesses, which is weird in itself. And then the 13s, always 13s. And so it's just that we have the Spanish flu starting during this time frame. But the main thing was there was the apparition of Mary. But then at the end, 70,000 people saw a UFO in Fatima, Portugal. And these things are starting to kick up again. The Catholic Church is talking about it. Oh, I don't want to go that direction. But anyway, the Catholic Church is talking about these apparitions. They realize that this is kind of important right now. Scott, do you have any comments, or Doug,
Yeah, I don't
on
understand why
apparitions?
not. I mean, they call her the Queen of Heaven. She's been elevated to this this second Trinitarian version of paganism. I mean, it just is what it is. You know, I'm not talking about the local people in the Catholic Church that have been deceived and they pray to their Virgin Mary beads and they pray to dead people, which is obviously totally against the Torah. It's sin. They're going to say, I'm not saying it's going to keep them out of the kingdom, but let's just call evil evil and good good. And praying to a dead woman is pure evil. And these apparitions are no doubt satanic and demonic. And millions and millions and billions have been deceived by the pontiff over the centuries. And this is just another example. And to your point about the dates, I don't think it's coincidence. A lot of things happened in 1917.
Oh, it's a
And
huge year.
and the deception with Mary, and like you made the connection with Islam. And now we have what's called Chrislam. And just if people would just read what the Pope says and what the Vatican produces, they are turning it into an ecumenical interfaith so long, and it's going to be sort of like the ancient Roman church. So long as you bow to mama, she won't kill you. You know, you can have your little pagan beliefs. You can be a Viking. You can worship your gods. We'll take your holiday and we'll graft it into our new bastardized religion. And it just is what it is. It's a harlot faith. Let's start calling it what it is. It is a harlot version of the religion, and you can trace it all the way back. There's only two harlots, guys. There's Samaria and there's Jerusalem that are called harlots. And what we have now we have the harlot faith of Judaisms and we have the harlot faith of Christianities. It is what it is. And what's happening now at this, I don't think this is coincidence that we're having this conversation, that people they're not leaving Jesus. They're not leaving Yeshua. They're abandoning all the nonsense that people have inherited these last 1700, 1800 years. That's the good news that's being fulfilled. We're seeing the groundswell of Deuteronomy 4 and Deuteronomy 30 beginning to be fulfilled. It's not there yet. It's not going to happen until the distress comes upon his people. His people being all of Israel, which certainly includes Judah. Certainly includes those Christians in the church. I believe many Roman Catholics are saved. I'm not condemning anybody to the lake of fire, but there is a hierarchy in the kingdom. And unless you're an earth denier or you believe the heavens passed away, regardless of what shape you think the earth is, and regardless of what you think the firmament is, Yeshua meant what he said. And millions are starting to believe him, as opposed to the lies we've all inherited from the Roman Catholic Church and her daughters.
Yeah.
So I want to close out with a couple of pictures just because they're so interesting. So these are basically people's representations of what chapter 9, the fifth trumpet looks like. And so you can see these should resemble what Doug showed you guys. Okay. The face is like a man, the hair like a woman, the wings, the all the stuff like that. So this is different representations. And then the one on the upper right-hand side is from L.A. Marzulli. He found some kind of a creature down in South America. But then the other one, just more ideas of what they're describing in chapter 9 of Revelation. And I'm arguing that they're extra dimensional things, that they're actually there right now. You just aren't seeing them. And at some point in time, the veil is going to thin, people, and it'll get kind of strange at that point in time. So, guys, any thoughts on what you just saw?
Well, yeah, I think that when you start having a lot of these things, these sightings coinciding with World War I, World War II, one, I think Satan, of course, he's a lot smarter than me, but, again, he can't see everything. And so probably with the coming of World War I and II, it's like, okay, we're getting close. You had, of course, the Balfour Declaration, all these things that were beginning to happen ever so slowly. He can read a calendar too. He's like, well, it's been about 2,000 years roughly. Maybe it's about time.
It's in the
So
window.
he's no dunce, right? We don't know exactly when that window closes. That's what we're all arguing about. But, you can at least see that, hey, it's getting pretty close to quitting time here. So, he can see that. And again, to my point is that he's trying to set the stage. He doesn't know when the curtain goes up. Only God knows when that curtain goes up. So, to all people that are claiming it's 2027, 2029, 2030, whatever you want to claim, we don't know when Jesus comes back. All right. We don't know when that curtain goes up. Yeah. When we see the abomination of desolation, then we know we got 3.5 years to go. From that point, the clock is ticking very, very loudly. But until then, we hear just a faint little tick tock every so often.
But the veil is thinning.
Images, I was just going to point out real quick, those images, if you look at some of the, not just going back to the ancient Near East, but if you look at some of the images in China and the Incans and the Mayans, I mean, there's a lot of similarities in these dragons.
Quetzalcoatl.
That's the other thing. The dragons in New York right now. Jonathan Cahn just came out and talked about the dragons invading New York. It's kind of bizarre, guys.
Quetzalcoatl is nothing. I mean, we saw the dragon, and he's a plumed, on the walls of the Ishtar Gate. You have a plumed serpent. I mean, you got to not think only snake kind of serpent. Just kind of think more dragon serpent type thing, and then you'll see it like it's everywhere. The plumed serpent, the feathered serpent is everywhere.
And what happened at Babel? 70 nations from that false religion, whatever, when God came down and judged Nimrod and judged all the people that he united, they spread out into 70 nations and they took these images with them.
That's right. And we are those 70 nations, That's what's so crazy is we are those 70 nations. Now, obviously, over time and distance and culture, you're going to have some variations on these themes, but they're the same basic themes. That's what's really amazing. So again, I think also with our technology, we're being able to see things, not just with the naked eye, but we can see infrared, we can see, all these different light waves. I think everything exists on the electromagnetic spectrum. I think Satan and all of his cronies and Michael and Gabriel and all those dudes, they all exist on the same electromagnetic spectrum. We can only see one part of it. We only have access to one part of it. There's probably parts we just don't know about, but it's all in a sense science. It's not, and this is where I think we really have this crossing over. All right. And a lot of sci-fi guys, I'm trying to think of the sci-fi writer, that talks about, anything that looks like it's so impossible, it's science. But if you take that back to people, 200, 300, 400 years ago, it would have looked like magic, and so what the Bible is talking about is sort of couched in sort of magic, spiritual kind of terms. But once you sort of take it up to what it is, I mean, let's take your smartphone. That's a magical device, I mean, in the, John's writing about smartphones in the future. In the future, everyone will be looking at their hand, and they will be scrolling on their hand, and they'll be addicted, and they'll be happy and sad, and then they'll put their hand to their ear and they'll talk to people, and then they'll look at people, and you're like, what is going on, right? But now we can understand because we have these devices, and but again, it would have looked like at pure science fiction, or it would look like fantasy magic to people 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So once you can kind of take some of these concepts and take them out of that, it's spiritual kind of stuff, and just say, no, it's all part of what's happening today. It really changes our perspective. And so, did we answer whether that Las Vegas alien was real? I mean,
Scott Roeder claims it's real. Scott
Okay.
and I talked for about a half an hour 3 weeks ago. He said, absolutely, Miami. The cops saw it. They verified it with him. He says he could walk into court and prove it in both cases, Miami and Las Vegas. So that means I believe the veil is thinning, guys, and they're allowing more things to occur. What, Scott?
I was going to say, is there someone where our audience can actually go where he's done a presentation and been interviewed since you scared him off earlier?
Yes, I'll try to find the actual interview that he did do. And yeah, you know, guys, he's a nice guy. He texted me a bunch of times during the show and he said, I'm really sorry. I'm exhausted. I can barely move. You know, he's been flying all over the place. So I'm sorry, but I will do different things in the future to get them booked and confirmed. These guys kid me because they want to do more shows like this. And I like to have guests because then I don't have to cover a lot of time. Oh, well. Anyway, we'll have a fun show next week. We're trying to get Tim Hillis in to talk about 1776 occulted. And guys, just so you're aware, we're not bashing on Washington and you know all of our leaders, Jefferson, things like that. What we're talking about is Christian nationalism and how it's going to be an issue going forward.
Tim's done a lot of research into this.
He's great. Great.
And about the dangers of if people get what they want, if some of the Paula Whites or the Rick Warrens, I like my friend Gavin Finley, that's been on the show with us before. You know, he has a timeline where he believes that this harlot religious system dominates and controls for the first 3.5 years of the final 7-year period. And again, I'm not saying he's wrong, because when this comes together, this harlot faith, I do believe it will, sort of like Roman Catholicism controlled sort of the European world for a period of time. It was called the Dark Ages for a reason. I believe that happens again, and America would certainly play into this globalized religion, and I can see it being used somehow prior to being judged, just like the woman rides the beast, and then it's God that uses the beast to judge the harlot.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So. Well, awesome. Thank you, Joel. That was really a lot of fun. Yeah. Everyone, thank you out there. Hey, if you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp, and you can give a donation of your size. But hey, why don't you make it a coffee or something better? And you can do that. Thank you. Hey, make sure to share stuff. If you haven't signed up already for Graceful Roar, my YouTube channel, a new YouTube channel, we're putting out all kinds of cool stuff. We're putting out morning prayer devotional kind of stuff. We're putting out sort of inspiration. God loves you. What do you do in tough times? That stuff. And we're putting out sort of like these Bible documentaries. Okay, so we're kind of doing Nimrod right now. That's what we have so far. So check that out. Nimrod and Enlil. Those are the two videos that we have on those themes. More coming. My co-author has been very busy. He's working just like morning to night on another project. So he's doing that for just a very temporary moment. And then we will come out with even more content. So I'm really excited about that. We have one on the Tower of Babel. So that is in the works. Okay. So keep that in mind. If you want to become a patron of that, please do. It would really help us to get those out faster. They do cost a lot of money to produce, just so you know that. They're not free by any means. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, a lot of money to produce those. So consider, supporting that channel or supporting this one. Either way, you can go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. Till next time, God bless you guys.